Hi, everybody. Welcome back to your favorite Gundam podcast, Colony Drop. My name is Isaac.
And my name is Brian, and this is a podcast where we talk about anything and everything related to the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise. From the anime to the movies to the model kits to the clothes to the food to the live-action movie, Isaac.
Absolutely right. And that will actually be our topic today, the live-action movie, or should I say, the live-action streaming feature. Ooh.
So let me paint you a picture, Isaac. So I get to work on, I think, Monday morning. And I'm doing my work, and I'm already, in a bad mood because it's Monday morning. I think it was Monday. Was it Monday when this happened?
At this point in corporate America, every day's the same.
That's true. It just rolls right on over.
Every day is sad day. In our wage slave lives.
Yep. So I'm scrolling through my emails that I get over the weekend. What's wrong with people? And one of our listeners, Snood Master K, sends me a message saying, "Hey, did you see that Legendary's teaming with Netflix now for the Gundam movie?" And I was like, "Oh no, now I got a whole new set of problems to deal with." So I go read this article, and why don't you tell us the news, Isaac?
Okay. As you may have known, friends, the Gundam production was somewhat halted recently. For those of you who are just tuning in recently, there was a live-action Gundam movie announced years ago. Perhaps 2, I think, by now, Brian?
And back in 2018.
Okay, yeah. All right, so it's been in the works for a while now. Sort of development hell, I suppose. We had no details about what it'd be like or anything like that. We just knew it was slowly moving forward. And then, bam, 2020, pandemic hit. The world ground to a halt, and most especially Hollywood and the entertainment industry ground to a halt, because obviously it's difficult to film scenes and such when you're not able to get in close proximity. So Brian and I had a previous episode where we more or less assumed the project was dead in the water, and for all intents and purposes, unless we heard anything, that was the end of it. Guess what? We heard something. The Gundam movie will be going forward, and it'll be a live-action film appearing on Netflix.
That's a bombshell, Isaac. That's a bombshell.
Yeah. This is like having a car in park, and then, you go from 0 to 90 through the other cars in the parking lot.
Yep. Immediate implications of that. Number one, this means that basically this is probably going to be a exclusively streaming movie on Netflix. I mean, maybe they'll do like a limited theatrical release like what they've done in the past for some award qualifications. I would not imagine this being a wide release, would you, Isaac?
No, it's funny you mention that, though, because according to a news website I was reading, it's actually going to be viewable, or released in theaters, I should say, in China. What?
Does Netflix even exist in China? I don't think Netflix exists in China.
Maybe not. Well, I'm sure that, the Chinese government has ensured that only a streaming service approved by them would be allowed to operate business. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Netflix is not available in China. That's why.
Yeah, but they're saying it'll be released in theaters.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, most foreign governments have strict regulations about who can own media companies in their countries. So people like Netflix, they may not be quite as freely able to operate in such an environment. And they're clearly not, because there is no Netflix in China, or at least not legally.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's in Japan, because there must be a ton of Japanese fans, right? I don't know. Is there a Netflix in Japan?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a Netflix in Japan. I would say that's a media-friendly environment.
They'll pirate this movie when it comes out. So, yeah, it looks like it's actually in the works now, listeners. This movie, it's going to be happening. It's going to be available on Netflix, and I have mixed feelings about it, Brian. I don't know how you feel about it, but let me back up a bit. As anime fans well know, there's a great series called Death Note, and unfortunately, Netflix decided to make a live-action version of it, and it was not great, I must say. I'm fearful the same thing will happen to this Gundam movie, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an unreasonable fear, I don't think. I think there's things to be fearful of, and I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. What do you want to? What should I talk about first? The fearful or the hopeful?
The hopeful. Let's start with the hopeful note before we go into the Valley of Darkness.
Okay. So the hopeful are the writer and now the director. So one thing that was announced in 2018, which has stayed true through to the new announcement this week, is that Brian K. Vaughn is still the writer. And we've talked about him on previous podcasts, but he's an excellent comic book writer. He's written Ride the Last Man, Saga, Ex Machina, Runaways. He's won a bunch of awards. I've personally read a bunch of his stuff. It's very good. Highly recommend you go check it out. So you really can't ask for a better writer to get chosen to adapt your property. Now, whether or not he does a good job, I don't know. Obviously, the movie doesn't exist. But from a theoretical standpoint, they chose someone great. So good. Writer's good. Now, before we didn't have a director, but in conjunction with the new announcement with Netflix, that director was named, and his name is Jordan Vogt Roberts. He directed Kong Skull Island as well as The Kings of Summer. He was also currently working on the Metal Gear Solid film.
Wow.
From what I can tell from him, he seems to be a pretty good choice for the job. I have seen Kong Skull Island, which I enjoyed. I've not seen Kings of Summer, but I see a lot of good reviews for that. So maybe I'll go check it out. I don't know. Have you seen Kings of Summer, Isaac?
No, I haven't, and I didn't see Kong Skull Island. But, I mean, a Metal Gear Solid movie sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And Why the Last Man was incredible, so I'm pretty optimistic, at least with the writing and maybe how the directing will go, but the finished product, it's so up in the air. I have no idea what we're actually going to get. I don't even know if this is going to be like a recognizable Gundam to fans, you know? We don't even know if it's going to be in the UC.
100%, I agree. And so, but that's why I think I'm staking my hopes on the writer and the director, because I already know the writer's good. And so then I started looking into the director. You know, I started looking through his tweets like some, dirty fan. So his tweet, he describes himself this way, that he views the world through an anime-tinted lens and thinks in language of video games. I was like, okay, all right. I was like, Gundam seems appropriate for you then. And then I think there's two things that I really liked about him. One, at the Godzilla vs. Kong premiere, which notably happened before this announcement went out, so this probably means that he's been chosen for a while. He wore a jacket with a Tekkaden logo on it. How about that, Isaac?
I mean, could this be a nod that he's going to make Iron-Blooded Orphans the movie?
I don't know, maybe. But and then a few days.
No.
Yeah, probably not. And then a few days before the announcement went out, he retweeted an article commemorating the initial air date of Mobile Suit Gundam 0079 airing in Japan, which was April 7th, as well as a picture of a Zaku holding Kong's axe from Kong Skull Island. It was kind of like a meme kind of thing where the Zaku was holding the axe, and then down below the caption was, "Now I can finally beat the Gundam." And I thought, oh, you know what? I think this guy gets it. I think he might be a real fan. So then I went and watched one or two interviews with him, and I mean, he seems like a legit anime fan. Seems like a talented guy. So out of all the people they could have chose, I think he's probably a good choice. Kong Skull Island, he has experience doing large-scale battles. He seems to be a fan of the property. He's paired with a great writer. I think the chance for a good story is there.
Okay. I agree. I'm just not sure. I'm trying to think, does the preponderance of data support this? Like, the majority of live-action anime movies that we've seen, are they actually good?
No, they're not. I can't name a good one. I've not seen Death Note, but I mean, I've seen trailers and things of other, live-action anime movies, and there's never been one where I saw the trailer or really anything about it, and I was like, yeah, I really want to watch that. That doesn't mean it can't happen.
That's true. It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm preparing myself. I'm like, okay, it's probably not going to be good. Just don't even be excited now. But I do want it to succeed, because I can imagine if it does succeed, maybe Netflix will say, all right, we'll do a sequel, and then a threequel, and then etc.,
Yeah, agree. So it's interesting that you bring up the whole, anime live action films are bad, because if you read all the comments on the announcement, I haven't read them in a few days, but initially the first day or two, the reactions to the announcement were sort of mixed, because on the one hand you had pretty much everyone saying, like if you go look at the articles where Netflix is saying it, or where the article is hyping that the film will be on Netflix, all the comments are very like, oh god, not another live action anime on Netflix, it's gonna be terrible, don't you dare ruin this, blah 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 blah. Like, what? There's a lot of funny tweets. I saved them thinking I could read them on this podcast, but now I don't know where I put them. But people were saying things like, what did I do? Like, good guy, like Amuro doesn't deserve this, or what did we do to deserve this? But then if you read all the comments on the articles that are more toned after talking about the director, people are very positive. They're like, hell yeah, like, this guy's great, we love it. So it really depends. Do you think that Netflix is going to have the hand in making the movie, or is it going to be the director? Every movie is different. Studio involvement varies depending on the film. I don't really know much about the Death Note movie's production, but Netflix maybe they just bought it and someone else made it, right? So they could have had nothing to do with it. They could have just said, okay, well, here's some money. And I don't even know if they own the movie. They could be licensing it from someone else for all I know. But someone could have came to them and said, hey, do you want to buy a Death Note movie? And they could have said sure, and then maybe the movie sucked, and that's not their fault for the movie sucking. They made a good decision to say yes to a Death Note movie, because who wouldn't say yes to a Death Note movie? Right. And Netflix is saying yes to pretty much every anime property. They're working on Cowboy Bebop. They're working on a One Piece series, live action series, which I think is like a weird idea. Isn't there a Bleach movie? Just everything under the sun. I'm pretty sure they just announced not too long ago they're going to make a Yu Yu Hakusho either movie or series or something. So they're just,
of course,
all these streaming companies, they just want content. So if it's successful, they're going to, put it into live action, just how Disney does, with all of its, just remake all of its animated movies into live action. People are like, oh, I like that movie, so I'll like this one, so they go watch it. So I think the main fear is exactly what you're talking about, that just past adaptations maybe not great.
Yeah, I'll adjust my opinion. I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic, which might be the most predictable response for an upcoming Gundam movie. But let me just say, based on the weight of the writer and the director, I am optimistic that they'll do well, but I'll be cautious also just based on how bland to mediocre to bad live-action anime movies have been. The story won't be a complete rematch or a retelling, I should say, of the 1 Year War, regular Mobile Suit Gundam 0079. I kind of want them to, at this point, maybe just think of something different, maybe tell his own story if he's a fan. I'm sure he's got a few rattling around in his head, because, I don't know, you can't put the 1 Year War in 2 hours. I'm not even sure where you'd put, like, the end of a 2-hour movie, as far as the first few episodes of 0079.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, and if you were going to do the 1 Year War, or I should say, if you were going to do the original story, the Amuro Char story, in movie format, the movie trilogy that was already a compilation of the anime series is already the shortest you would want to go, right? And that's already 3 movies. So to get those 3 movies, which were already condensing 42 episodes, down into one movie, that just seems like a terrible idea. So I thought about that as well. In my mind, you don't hire Brian K. Vaughn to just straight up adapt the whole thing in 2 hours. He's either doing something original, meaning like non-UC, just let's do a live action universe, or he's doing some really nuts side story, which could be cool too. I agree. You're not going to fit the whole thing in 2 hours, unless this is part 1. And they know they're going to make 3 of them or something, and they just haven't told us that yet. But I find that highly doubtful.
You know what? I say this movie becomes the redemption project of G Savior and live-action Gundam movies. Like, he needs to prove that it can be done well. He's going to make his own story. Maybe it'll be in the UC, maybe it won't, whatever. Maybe it'll take place after G Savior, for all we know. But I think he should do his own story. So should the writer, just because they'll have so much more room. Blank canvas, do your own story. It has to have a Gundam. That's it. Here's your budget. Go do it. And it's going to stream on Netflix in 13 months. So
yeah,
I say they do that, and I'm very optimistic. It will be a unique story if it is done. If it's a retelling of the 1 Year War, I think it's going to be very hard to stick the landing.
if you were redoing the 1 Year War in 2 hours, what part of it would you do, or where would you end it? Or would you go all the way to the end, or would you try to end on like a cliffhanger?
No, you would have to compact the story and make it like the Gundam leaving the colony, getting to Earth, maybe a few battles, and the final battles like Odessa, and you kind of frame it as, oh, the Earth is liberated, roll credits.
Yeah. I feel like you might even have to just skip Earth.
Wow. Okay. How does that work though? We don't know. See,
you might have to go get the Gundam and go right to Baoku.
So wow. God, that's so much to.
I mean,
2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so short. But you only got 2 hours, right? And that's if you make a 2 hour film. I mean, do you really have 2 hours, or do you really have an hour and a half or hour 45?
Yeah, that's true. You'd have to kind of readjust the story. Then you'd have to say, okay, we're starting on Earth. A few battles. We go into space. Final battle. Roll credits.
Yeah, and you'd have to already start with a highly trained pilot, maybe.
Yeah, or you do like a montage.
I know, man.
Like in a Rocky movie or Creed. Yeah. You play that South Park montage, or the Team America montage music.
It's a montage.
Show a lot of things happening at once. Reminds everyone of what's going on.
Taking odds, do you think the film will have a training montage?
I hope not. With like the Gundam song in the background or something.
Yeah, with with Eye of the Tiger.
I really hope they don't. Like, what are they gonna show? Oh, they're gonna show like him in a simulator, right?
Yeah.
And, like at the start of the montage, he's doing terrible, and like, the bright nose, like, come on, come on, kid, you gotta target more.
His trainer will be Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah. You gotta get up. Throw another punch at the Zaku.
Oh boy. So my initial reaction was, I was happy about the director once I figured out who this person was, but I was mostly disappointed, to be honest, that it's not going to be a theatrical release. Because to me, that already makes the film feel smaller and like less of a spectacle. But I recognize that that's a subjective opinion. But the reason I think that way, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't remember where I first heard this comparison. We've made it here on the show multiple times, is that to me, Gundam is Japan's Star Wars in terms of like level of pop culture relevance, and just kind of, it's what everyone knows and loves. I'm not saying that everyone loves Star Wars, but as a whole, I would say that the U.S. film going audience, for the most part, loves Star Wars. And Star Wars was fueled by fans who remember the Death Star exploding in the theater that first time. They don't remember the Death Star exploding on their phone or a tablet or a TV. And so I'm just worried that if you were looking for that kind of franchise to take off, I don't know that you're going to get it by putting it on a streaming service amongst the thousands of other things to watch on Netflix.
Wow, Brian, I think you really cut the legs off the the cautious optimism.
Well, I mean, think about
it's a good point. Yeah.
You watch a lot of Netflix. Do movies on there feel more disposable, rightly or wrongly, than they do when they're in a theater?
Maybe, but then again, I haven't been in theater in a long time.
No. Yeah.
So it's hard for me to measure that. But you make a good point, though. I mean, yeah, Netflix movies are definitely smaller, right? They're Netflix. So a Netflix production, it's not bare bones, but we don't put them to the same standards for sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring up standards. So one thing we talked about a lot on our last podcast about the movie was about budgets and how COVID was probably hurting the budget. And Sunrise and Legendary, I'm sure by doing this move, they're trying to make sure that this film reaches the largest possible audience. And right now that's Netflix. I mean, they have well over 200 million something subscribers, worldwide, which is huge, right? I mean, if you put this on Netflix, like overnight, that many people have access to it and can watch it without paying anything extra. So again, that's great. My only concern then is, that the movie is going to be made for Netflix and it's not necessarily made for a theater, I would assume. Maybe they'll make it just like they would a theatrical film. I don't know. So then I started to think, okay, well, what does the data look like for budgets of Netflix originals? Here's where I'm hoping you can help me, Isaac, because I have not seen most of these films.
Do it.
So what I did was I went and found the budgets for all of the Pacific Rim films and all of the MonsterVerse films, which Legendary has put out. So this is Pacific Rim Uprising, Godzilla vs. Kong, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Kong Skull Island. Because again, Legendary is making this film along with Sunrise, now with Netflix. So I figured those are probably the most comparable theatrical titles that we could expect. So the budgets on those range. This is probably before marketing, but the budgets on those range anywhere from 150 to 190 million. Okay. So if you add in marketing, for a theatrical release, it's going to be more than that, depending on how much you want to market. So then I went through a list of Netflix originals, and I picked out what I thought were notable Netflix original movies, and I looked at the budgets for those.
Yeah.
Ones I thought were notable were Cloverfield Paradox, Bird Box, Extraction, The Old Guard, Project Power, and Army of the Dead. So Bird Box was the lowest at 20 million.
Wow.
And then the rest of them were 45 to 90. Okay, so those are markedly lower, right?
Yeah.
Than the theatricals. Then there's another tier, though. So then I was like, well, those are the ones that I just thought were notable. What are the most expensive Netflix original films? So I found some different lists online. They were fairly consistent. But it seems like the four most expensive were Six Underground, which cost 150 million, but that was directed by Michael Bay. So I'm sure 50 million of that was on explosions.
Mm-hmm. And white sparks.
And white, yeah. And like Bumblebee for some reason. Have you seen Six Underground, Isaac? Was it worth $150 million?
I don't think I saw it. Is that the one with Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds is in that one. 6 individuals, all from all around the globe, each the very best at what they do, have been chosen to delete their pasts in order to change the future. Something.
Of course.
Okay, so 150 million. That's more comparable. You have The Irishman, which was directed by Martin Scorsese.
Wow.
That was 160 million.
Wow. Okay, pretty up there. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's Scorsese.
Yeah. Right. So far you see what's happening, right? The bigger directors are getting more money.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether it's from Netflix or from
Their track
whoever.
record
Yeah.
or whatever.
Then we have Red Notice, which has not come out yet, but that's at 160 million, and that's starring The Rock, Gal Gadot, and Ryan Reynolds. So I'm assuming most of that is probably salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have something else called The Gray Man, which is being made by the Russo brothers. So those are the brothers who directed the Avengers films and the Captain America films. And that's starring Chris Evans. So you can see that those 4 movies are much more expensive than probably most of Netflix's other films, but they're also backed by either a star director or really huge stars. So, that gives you an idea. So those 4 films, Netflix's most expensive films, are comparable to the MonsterVerse films and Pacific Rim. Now, I would say that Pacific Rim and the MonsterVerse, while big budget, they're also not as big of a budget as, say, the Avengers films or Batman vs. Superman or something like that. So, with that in mind, where do you think the Gundam movie is going to fall? Do you think it instantly catapults to top 5? Like, for example, because we were saying, okay, this thing's got to be 200 million, right?
Right.
Given the amount of effects and things, it's probably closest to like Pacific Rim, right? Because it's it's gonna be in the future. You need to have the mobile suits. The original Pacific Rim was 190.
Maybe.
The second Pacific Rim was 150.
Yeah.
I would argue that it showed.
I'm gonna actually say that it's gonna be 100 max. Just because it's on Netflix now, I don't think you're gonna get a big screen budget on the small screen, on the stream screen.
I think that's a fair assumption. Hopefully they give it more. But this is something that, in my mind, no matter how good of a story Brian K. Vaughn and John Vogt Roberts come up with, from like a pure effects perspective, they could be limited based on what someone is willing to pay for this film. I forget the listener's name who mentioned it, but he was very adamant that they would have to create everything from the ground up. And
even the mobile suits.
And so that is a valid concern. Hopefully they, either spend enough money or find a good way to do it to where we don't notice, maybe if they only spend $100 million. The only thing I'm skeptical of is just that if there was a way to make a $200 million movie for $100 million, everyone would be doing it, right?
Yeah, I don't see why Netflix would put so much, well, not necessarily Netflix, but I don't see why so much money would go into something that's going to be streaming compared to, the numbers we see for back in the day, what used to be big screen movies. There's no reason to do it,
Yeah, I agree. And for reference, I did look up the budget for Death Note. You want to guess on that one?
60 to 80.
40.
Oh God. We're doomed.
Yeah, so it depends on what people view it as, right? If you're Netflix, do you view this as a live action anime adaptation and you give it $50 million? Or do you view it as equivalent to your Scorsese film and your Michael Bay film and your The Rock film and your Russo brothers film and you give it 150? So that's why I think your guess of 100 is probably fairly good, because it's probably somewhere in the middle of those two, right? So I don't know. We'll see. And again, these are all, a lot of these figures are from like Box Office Mojo, and I don't know where people are getting their info for Netflix, but I'm not saying they're exactly right, but I'm guessing that the magnitude comparison holds true, in that generally Netflix films have a lower budget than theatrical films. I don't think anyone would argue that. So, when someone says, oh, I'm worried that this is going to be on Netflix, I think it kind of comes down to the budget, because that affects every part of the production, who you can hire.
We were a little, I don't know if we were smoking when we, well, no. What I'm trying to say is, when we made our dream casting, do you remember that episode?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We were clearly under the assumption this would be a big, Hollywood movie. But now that it's a stream movie, I imagine we'll see some very familiar faces we've seen in Netflix movies or Netflix series.
We also casted it, assuming, though, that it would be a big budget blockbuster theatrical release. And also, who wants to tie down their fan casting, right?
Yeah, we're living in the moment.
Yeah.
Now we're living in the reality, Brian, that this is going on Netflix. It's got a good director, a good writer, so it might be good, but it's going to have a Netflix budget. Yeah.
But our guess of 200 before is actually fairly comparable to the other stuff that Legendary has put out in this vein. Yeah. So if it had stayed theatrical, I think we may have been a little bit closer.
It's a pity it's actually not going to be on big screen. I think we both feel that, and now we just have to be glad that it's happening in some form. We'll see how it actually comes out. I guess as screenshots start getting released and trailers and stuff, we'll finally be able to get like a taste for it and be like, oh, okay, this actually looks good. Or we'll be like, oh no, they Death Noted it. And then, from there we'll watch and we'll report back.
I guess what I'll say is, like you, I'm cautiously optimistic. I have no doubt in the ability of the writer and director to deliver a good film. Will the execution be on point? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Will it become the phenomenon that we think it could become? Definitely not sure on that one. But again, I guess this love for theatrical films, maybe that's just me being old. Maybe new fans don't care about theaters anymore. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out as the months go on and theaters open up again, and see if audiences come back. Godzilla vs. Kong did fairly well. I think domestic box is already at 75, which during COVID is pretty good.
I had no idea some theaters were open around us. But yeah, I'm eager to go back. There's some big movies coming out I definitely want to see, like Dune. It's going to be awesome in theaters. But yeah, it's too bad Gundam can't be on that list.
Yeah. Maybe Netflix will make an exception and put Gundam on a theatrical release, but I doubt it.
Or it'll be one of the best Netflix streaming movies ever, Brian. Netflix will decide to create a whole series and release it in theaters.
That could very well be true too.
They Iron Manned it. Instead of Death Noted it, they Iron Manned it. Ooh. And now the public can't get enough Gundam.
That's what we want, right?
Yeah.
Not that Brian K. Vaughn is listening, or not that John Vogt Roberts is listening, but we hope that you just knock it out of the park and start the Gundam phenomenon in the United States.
Make it a home run, even if you have to do your own story or set it in our timeline, or I don't know, just take the first few episodes of Gundam, whatever. Just make it great.
And I would say overall, I don't think people should be too upset at this news, because if you just take a step back, it's a great time right now to be a Gundam fan relative to other times in the last 20 years, right? Right now you have a full-on big-budget Gundam live-action movie being like actively made, not being talked about, being like it's gonna happen. You have 3 Universal Century movies coming into theaters and into DVD over the next 2-3 years for Hathaway's Flash. You've got the live action Gundam build reel airing. I think they just started another like Gundam SD show airing. I don't know if it airs on YouTube or where, but that's 4 like active Gundam things happening. I think that hits all notes, and there's all kinds of merchandise for you to go pick through. So I think relative to other times, other years being a Gundam fan, this is a great time, regardless of maybe that movie doesn't go well, but optimism. What did I say the other day? Hope springs eternal.
There you go.
I'm hopeful. And what did you say? Zeon. That's all Zeon has is hope. So
Zeon only runs on hope. I mean, no matter how many wars they lose, they always come back. So we should take the same approach. This will, G Savior crashed into the ground. We need to hope that this one flies. And if it does crash into the ground, I think we need to maybe we'll end up appreciating it as so good it's bad, or so bad it's good.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed.
So that leads us into our, I'll call it the second topic of this episode, Isaac, which was supposed to be the original topic for today's episode. And then this bombshell of a news thing came out and sort of changed our plans. But I think it blends nicely together, like you said. So our original topic today was going to be, should you set a Gundam film in our timeline? And kind of anything around setting a Gundam film in our timeline, the what ifs and the consequences of that. And to me, this doesn't mean in our timeline, but in the far future, which is arguably Universal Century, or straight up in 00, which I think takes place in like AD 2300 something. I think when you asked this question, you meant more like in our near future, right?
In our near future, in the past, I mean...
Yeah, within the last 20 to 30 back and forth year, forward, backward.
Pretty much. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, could you do a Gundam series in our timeline if, like, this Netflix series came out and they were like, oh, we're not doing anything UC or, whatever. We're going to try to get, like, maybe fans that aren't necessarily into Gundam, but maybe into, like, military history or something. We're going to get them really on our side and do something that, if you saw it, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a Soviet mobile suit or something. I guess I should watch. Or like, oh, it's, it's the Gundam, fighting in, I don't know, against China or something.
Our discussion quickly devolved into like a worst case scenario, if I remember correctly.
A War on Terror Gundam or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it can be done right, but at the same time, I wouldn't fault a director and a writer for trying and seeing, oh, okay, well, this will translate well. Like, it'll be, the War on Terror just ended. We'll have, like, War on Terror mobile suits fighting, and people will be able to relate, and, everybody will watch it because everybody, like war movies and stuff like that, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that the pitch for that would be, a war movie, but with robots, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's just like, the Cold War, but with robots.
Right. And that works in the 8th MS team because that pitch is a war movie with robots, but within the Universal Century, which is already established. If you just do an army movie in like today's timeline with robots and call it Gundam, I feel like that would be very different. I don't know that would be very Gundam at all.
I guess what we're really saying is the actual writer and director for this Netflix series, like, would we want them to do it in our timeline, Brian?
My overall answer to that is no, and let me explain how I got there. I think there are at least 3 problems that you would have to deal with as a writer-director if you wanted to set Gundam in our timeline today, like within the last either 20 years before or after today, or maybe even 50. So the one is scale. So like far future stories like the Universal Century, or just really any sci-fi story in the far future, always has this benefit of sort of fiating like the necessary manufacturing capacity to create these massive space battles, right? You can just say, oh, well, we colonized space, and when we got up there was so much more material in the asteroids, and we made all this stuff. But if you think about, like, would we be able to make a space colony today? No, we still really suck at space, right? I mean, we're getting a lot better, but we still suck at space relative to where we would need to be to make Gundam happen in terms of the space colonies and the repeatability and sophistication of space travel. So I think scale and space are big things that you'd have to deal with. If you set it within the near future or even the past, you'd have to basically get rid of the space element, I think. What do you think about that?
You'd have to, yeah. I mean, unless you do like, I don't know, sort of a 20 minutes into the future, and for whatever reason, there's at least one colony or something, like, the world put aside its differences and built one colony or something like that.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah, and then like, Zeon is actually like, a group of rebels that are kind of in the colony or something around the world. It's not like a whole group of colonies or whatever. But I actually think it'd be wrong to do like a Cold War type Gundam, just because, I don't know, you'd be going back and then like it'd be the Soviet Union versus the US, and I don't know, the technology I think wouldn't age too well as we backdate it. So yeah, you would have to go forward and either make your story smaller and say there's like only one colony or like maybe a couple, something like that, or you actually do have to do the UC just to grab the fans' loyalty, and also present it pretty much in the prepackaged story that we already have.
Yeah, I think if you go back and do a Cold War story where the U.S. and its allies are fighting Russia or China, I mean, I think we've seen that story enough.
It's Red Dawn with like Zaku's that have hammer and sickles on them, and like the NATO countries with like their own little flags or something.
Right, and I mean that works in G Gundam because G Gundam isn't the main Gundam series, right? G Gundam is like the dessert that you eat after watching real Gundam. But if you lead with that, I don't think it'll work. And I think you can do that Cold War story with anything. I mean, you can do that story, but you don't need Gundam to do it. You could use a different vehicle. I don't think you need to slap the Gundam franchise name on a Cold War story when it doesn't even involve space colonies or anything like that. I mean, I would argue that Space Noid Independence is one of the key plot points to Gundam. Like that's part of what makes Gundam Gundam. And if you get rid of it, and it doesn't have to be space colonies. It could be Mars, like in Iron-Blooded Orphans, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's an easier way to do it in a film. Mars might be more understandable.
Maybe.
I mean, Mars is in the news a lot, so...
That's true. But, I don't know, we'll end up with, like, Age Gundam.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, where Mars was the threat. Spoiler alert. It's been out for a while. One thing I wouldn't want to see, though, is, like, World War II Gundam. I feel like that'd be really weird. We'd see, like, a bunch of Third Reich Zaku's, and I don't know. It wouldn't make sense. At that point, we're dealing like with diesel technology. So like a diesel Gundam, no, that doesn't really work. So I don't think a Gundam story in our timeline can work.
I would read a World War II Gundam as like a manga. I don't think if you're gonna spend this much money on a film that you should be doing World War II Gundam.
Yeah.
I think you need to aim higher, right? You need to aim higher and you need to aim closer to Universal Century Gundam.
Right, and the Zeon are close enough already visually that I think at least the American audience will be like, oh, okay, we see the bad guys.
Right, like point taken, right?
Yeah, you don't have to do it in our timeline. It doesn't have to be, War on Terror Gundam with, Zaku's blowing things up for us to understand that, okay, Zeon's bad and, the guys in primary colors are good.
Yeah, we don't want to end up in this, like, jingoistic... like
we don't want the final battle to be like the Gundam carrying the American flag.
Yes.
On like a beam spear, and like it stabs the red Zaku that was like threatening to blow up the world.
Yes.
A Gundam story needs to be completely on its own, or it needs to exist based on what we've already seen in the UC, alternate universes, timelines, that kind of stuff. Our timeline, even if the writers were like, oh, oh god, I have a bad vision in my head, Brian, of like the opening crawl of like the Netflix Gundam being like, in the coming years, robotics technology advances at a breakneck pace. Nations build giant robots called mobile suits and wage war. The future is dark and barren. And then like they just show like, I don't know, the planet under climate change, and like the bad guys are Zaku's, and they're like taking the resources. They're accelerating climate change. and the good guys had to stop them and help the environment or something like that.
Yeah.
And it takes place in 2041. We'll be like, oh God, come on.
I think that's what Brian K. Vaughn is there for. I mean, he has really good character development. Like especially with Why the Last Man and Saga, there's a lot of world building there. So I mean, he definitely has the ability to create something on a mass scale that would make sense for this universe. And climate change is a more like hot button topic than overpopulation today. So maybe in this universe, the impetus for creating the space colonies is, like you said, climate change. Maybe we fast forward 100 years and things are not going well. Maybe cities are underwater and things like that. And so people will have to figure out what else to do, and we go to space. So that could be a good way to adapt a story. I don't know, make it feel more relevant.
Yeah. And
then getting Mars in there, that could be a real thing too. Especially with that, the director was wearing that Tekkadan patch. I don't know.
Oh, well, he's gonna do a mashup where like the Earth Federation has to fight Tekkadan.
Don't worry, listeners. Tekkadan will still charge in headfirst, and they will still get destroyed by what were those things called? The
Dane sleeves.
Dane sleeves. Yeah. Oh man.
God, they're fire from orbit. God, that was such a good series.
It was good. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that live action. I just don't know if you can do that in 2 hours. You need like, I don't know, 2 3-hour movies, 3-hour movies.
I think time is the real enemy of this movie, given the scope and the scale of Gundam. Gundam's a big thing, and it survived. It was built on 50 episode-ish TV series for a long time, right?
Right.
You don't have that in a film. You've got a guaranteed hour 45, and then after that, a certain amount of your film audience will start saying the film is too long. But it's not as if another half hour is going to get you the rest of the story either. It's a holistic time problem. Realistically, if you were adapting, 0079, you could probably get to Earth in 2 hours.
Yeah, or less, I suppose. I mean,
like comfortably, like where if someone gave me that assignment, I'd be like, yeah, I could do that. You skip some things, but you could get to Earth in 2 hours for sure.
Just make it where they immediately get to Earth after the colony's gone. Destroy that colony in the first 20 minutes, get to Earth in 25 minutes, and then afterwards you have 30 minutes on Earth, 45, and then wrap up the story with a space battle.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're trying to do the whole thing. I was thinking that you would end the movie on Earth.
Oh, okay. A battle at Jabrow or Odessa? Jodessa.
Yeah, just combine them.
The Federation base is under attack, and then by defeating it, Xeon forces are forced to leave. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. You're battling expectations, right? Because if you say, I'm going to make a Gundam movie, everyone's expecting you to they want to see Amuro versus Char, right?
Yeah.
But how do you give them Amuro versus Char in 2 hours?
He has to fight Amuro 3 times. Opening battle,
right? Midway
battle, and then a final battle.
Correct. One where Char wins, the middle is where they're more even, and then at the end Amuro wins.
Yeah. It writes itself.
The thing that fits in 2 hours, though, Isaac, is the 8th MS team style side story. That's what fits in 2 hours, where you begin your movie, you don't have a whole lot of introduction. You just, okay, we're launching, and they get in the suits and they roll out, and we kind of jump into it. But yeah, I agree. I don't know how you do the whole thing in 2 hours. We'll see.
I just hope it's done well, whether it's a new story or not, whether it's part of 0079, and we just enjoy it. If it is a train wreck, Brian, may it be the most hilarious train wreck we've ever seen, and we just laugh, making memes out of it, just posting them, the clips, the GIFs that will come from it. We'll make we'll spin that straw into gold.
Yeah. So from the Colony Drop team here, Brian K. Vaughn and John Vogt Roberts, we believe in you. Please do your best.
Whatever you do, do your best. This has to be a home run.
We're relying on you.
Yeah, we need redemption for all the souls that were lost at G Savior.
At this point, I gotta think they've watched G Savior, right?
They
just as research.
I hope they did. If not, should we send it to them?
Please just don't
Yeah.
do this.
It just says, please open. They're like, oh, their assistants are like, it was unaddressed. There's no return address. It's just Z-Savior.
And then the next day they leave the project.
They're like, yeah, we can't slay this dragon. It's too powerful.
Yeah. So listeners, let us know what you think of this new announcement. Are you excited that it's on Netflix? Are you hesitant that it's on Netflix? What do you hope the film is going to be about? Do you hope it's going to be about Universal Century, something original, or maybe some other alternate universe, no matter how, not likely that may be? I think given that we now know, okay, now that it's on Netflix, I think maybe people's opinions may shift on some of those topics.
I think we all just want to smile at the end of the movie. Whenever we see, whether it's Amuro or other characters, or for all we know, it's going to be from Shar's perspective,
Oh, yeah.
Who knows what they've got up their sleeve? If you ever read Why the Last Man, it's quite the story.
Yeah. Why the Last Man's great.
Like it.
If nothing else, now you've heard Brian K. Vaughn's name, and you can go read all of his good comic books.
Check out everything, and then even check out anime live action movies just to prepare yourself for what might happen.
So I've not actually seen the Death Note movie. I really enjoyed the series, though, particularly the first half.
Uh-huh.
What was real bad about it?
The writing, the pacing, some of the acting, a lot of the dialogue, how much they changed the nature of the characters, the ending itself.
Wow,
Dafoe was good voice acting. Well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. If you got time this weekend, check it out. It's a short watch. It's one of those movies where you can kind of put on and then, I don't know, do something on your computer.
Oh,
on your
ouch.
phone. I don't know, cook dinner and fold some clothes, whatever. But
oh boy,
yeah, you'll see for yourself, and you'll be like, wow, this is about what I expected. I also massively disagree with one of the casting choices, and you'll see why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're cautiously optimistic. Take us out, Isaac.
Follow us wherever you follow your favorite podcasts, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Leave a review if you want, and before you go to sleep tonight, stand next to your bed, get on your knees, put your hands together, look at the ceiling, and hail Xeon.
And pray that the Gundam movie is good, damn it.
Yes, that too. Pray to Dagwin, the great Dagwin.
Everyone needs to go hang a picture of Dagwin in their room and pray to it every night.
He's watching out for you. He's making the big decision with his great Dagwin mind.
All right, everybody. Take care. Stay safe out there.
See ya. Bye.